o'clock Eastern Time here on C-SPAN and, of course, on C-SPAN Radio. Check out all of our schedule information online anytime at cspan.org. We now take you to the floor of the House of Representatives for today's session. Enjoy the rest of your day.
The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C. Day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. Loving God, we give you thanks for giving us another day. We thank you for the joy, excitement, and ceremony of yesterday when the 113th Congress convened. It was a celebration of the ongoing American experiment of participatory democracy. Today begins, if not in full force, the work of the Congress, when the difficulties facing our nation, and some communities especially, come into focus. We ask again an abundance of your wisdom for the members of the People's House. May we be forever grateful for the blessings our nation enjoys and appropriately generous with what we have to help those among us who are in need. May all that is done this day be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House her approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
Question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
At this point, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from New York, Mr. King.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You all ready with the names?
Yes.
So it's going to be Garrett. You ready? Does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Yes. To begin with, I announce that the list of co-sponsors to legislation submitted this morning should be treated as original co-sponsors, reflecting their intent to, and in fact should be, on the legislation when it was introduced late last night.
And the gentleman's statement will appear in the record. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
First of all, Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and extenuate material on this bill.
Without objection. The chair lays before the House a privileged concurrent resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 3. Resolved that when the Senate recesses or adjourns on any day from Friday, January 4th, 2013 through Monday, January 21st, 2013, on a motion offered pursuant to this concurrent resolution by its majority leader or his designee, it stand recessed or adjourned until 12 noon on Monday, January 21st, 2013, or such other time on that day as may be specified by its majority leader or his designee in the motion to recess or adjourn, or until the time of any reassembly pursuant to Section 2 of this concurrent resolution, whichever occurs first, and that when the House adjourns on any legislative day from Friday, January 4th, 2013, through Saturday, January 5th, 2013, on a motion offered pursuant to this concurrent resolution by its majority leader or his designee, it stand adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday, January 14th, 2013, or until the time of any reassembly pursuant to Section 2 of this concurrent resolution, whichever occurs first. Section 2. The majority leader of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, or their respective designees, acting jointly after consultation with the minority leader of the Senate and the minority leader of the House, shall notify the members of the Senate and House, respectively, to reassemble at such place and time as they may designate if, in their opinion, the public interest shall warrant it.
Without objection, the concurrent resolution is agreed to. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Now, for what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
There we go. Let's go back to the beginning. At this time, I move to suspend the rules and pass Bill 41.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 41, a bill to temporarily increase the borrowing authority of the Federal Emergency Management Agency for carrying out the National Flood Insurance Program.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Garrett, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
And specifically, just to be clear on the record, that with regard to H.R. 41, that I seek unanimous consent that all members will have the 5 legislative days to revise and extend without objection. And at which point, at this time, I yield myself just a couple minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. So I rise today to continue the process of this House of seeking to aid and help those American citizens who have been devastated by Hurricane Sandy. You know, this storm has left literally millions without power, thousands without homes, and the total area is destroyed. So the piece of legislation before us today is very simple. It temporarily increases FEMA's borrowing authority for carrying out the National Flood Insurance Program. And so this legislation is really vital to ensure that the homeowners in my state of New Jersey, as well as in New York and Connecticut and any other affected areas, will be able to continue to have their contractual flood insurance policies with the NFIP honored. So by temporarily increasing this borrowing authority, it will provide to both homeowners and insurance companies handling the claims that the federal government will meet its contractual obligations. People who have been devastated by the storm will be able to continue to move forward and onward with their lives. I want to take a moment just to commend the gentleman from New York, Mr. Grimm, who led a group of members and other volunteers to help clean and repair some of this devastated areas. I was pleased to personally join the gentlemen in their volunteer activity. While we witnessed much devastation and destruction, we also saw determination and friendly faces of local residents and volunteers from across the country who are committed to restoring and rebuilding this area. And so while it's easy for members to come to the floor and vote for a piece of legislation to help the area, it's a lot more difficult to be on the ground, physically working, scrubbing, lifting, building, and cleaning. And while the Congress can and does help, it is the hard work, the grit, and the determination of the citizens of the area and the volunteers and workers from all over the country that will ultimately be the driving force in this area. So to conclude, I again commend the gentleman from New York, Mr. Grimm, for his efforts, and the others around who have volunteered in this effort to look forward to continue to work with him and others in the area, both here and in Congress, for the people of New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut and the affected area. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from New York.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
You know, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased that today on this floor, though it may be a little late, that we'll finally act on a piece of legislation that's vital to Superstorm Sandy's disaster relief legislation to increase the borrowing authority by FEMA on behalf of the National Flood Insurance Program. By increasing financing by $9.7 billion, this bill will enable the provisions of essential relief of 120,000 flood victims who have waited for far too long for the payment on their claims. And I support today's bill as an important step for recovery from Superstorm Sandy. When taken as a whole, the House's actions to date, I believe, still are slow. 67, 68 days have gone by, and I know we've got some commitments, but we're moving forward, and I'm hopeful that we will get the full entitlement that the individuals from New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut vitally needs. Some of the programs, of course, that need essential funding include Army Corps of Engineers, who will work to protect New York's and New Jersey's and Connecticut's shorelines and coastal communities, and the Small Business Administration to provide loans to help small businesses. But let me, before I yield back my time, let me take some special time to thank Mr. Garrett. But I want to thank every member of the New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey delegation for working collectively together to try to make sure that our people, because this is an issue that affects the American people, that our people receive the kind of aid that they need. I particularly want to say to my friends, Mr. Grimm and Mr. King in New York, and I've seen several times that they've sat and worked together collectively with our governor, who I also want to give a special thank you to, Governor Mario Cuomo and Governor Chris Christie from New Jersey, for working cooperatively, not as a Democrat or as a Republican, but working as a member of, as an elected official, to come together to the aid of people who need aid from a terrible storm. And so I'm hopeful as we move forward. We do the $9 billion today, and we do what we need to do by January 15th, that we get certain things done, and finally the people of this region receive the kind of aid that it needs. And I resume the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from New Jersey.
And I thank the gentleman for his comments, and also recognize that this legislation helps not only those people in this neck of the woods as well, but across the country as we resume the money in the fund for FEMA and for the flood insurance program. With that, I yield now to the gentleman from Texas, the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, Mr. Hensley.
How much time does the gentleman?
2 minutes.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's no doubt that Hurricane Sandy rendered unspeakable damage to both lives and property on our East Coast. It represents truly one of the great natural disasters of recent history. For millions of our fellow citizens, the devastation has been unspeakable and unfathomable. It is time, obviously, to rebuild homes, buildings, and lives. For the victims who paid for flood insurance policies with the National Flood Insurance Program, their claims need to be paid, and paid now. But, Madam Speaker, here's the tragic reality. The National Flood Insurance Program is broke. It is beyond broke. It is now taxpayer bailout broke. Regrettably, not unlike our nation, broke. Trillions in debt. Debt to the Chinese, the shameful bill sent to our children and grandchildren. So right here, right now, Madam Speaker, members are faced with a tragic choice of not paying contractual claims to victims who paid premiums, or adding $9.7 billion to an insane national debt that threatens our national security, our economic well-being, and our children's future. Emergency bills like this should not come to the floor without offsets to pay for it or structural reforms to ensure that taxpayer bailouts are never needed again. Regrettably, less than 24 hours into a new Congress, there is simply not time for this. As many in this body know, I have long been critical of the National Flood Insurance Program. For more than 4 decades, this experiment in government-provided flood insurance has proven to be ineffective, inefficient, and indisputably costly to hardworking American taxpayers. Last Congress, we passed a reauthorization bill with modest reforms to begin eliminating outdated subsidies and get the program. Will the gentleman yield an additional 30 seconds?
Yield the gentleman from Texas an additional 30 seconds.
Outdated subsidies and get the program on a path towards actuarial soundness, but Sandy has hit before many of these provisions could take effect. As chairman of the Financial Services Committee, I wish to inform all members in this Congress our committee will take up legislation to transition to a private, innovative, competitive, sustainable flood insurance market, one that serves the needs of all of our countrymen but ends the unsustainable taxpayer bailouts once and for all. A great physical tragedy of today should never become an even greater fiscal tragedy for our children tomorrow. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York.
Yes, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Carolyn Maloney.
Gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman for his leadership and for yielding. Mr. Speaker, the victims of Superstorm Sandy can wait no longer. It's been 11 weeks. Haven't they suffered and waited long enough? The people who we represent, who sent us to Washington to serve, and who are now not merely crying out for help, they are screaming for assistance, demand that we act without further delay and pass this bill to immediately increase the borrowing authority of FEMA and carry out the intended purpose of the National Flood Insurance Program. That help is embarrassingly overdue. Right now, if we fail to act and do not pass this bill, there's a total of 120,000 flood insurance claims payments that will be delayed and not paid. This bill before us now will temporarily increase the borrowing authority for the National Flood Insurance Program by $9.7 billion. Much more is needed, and a vote has been promised of $51 billion on January 15th. That absolutely needs to happen. Funds for Katrina was passed this House in less than 2 weeks. We have been waiting for 11 weeks. For 11 weeks. Funds for Ike and Gustav passed very quickly. Again, the Northeast Corridor has been waiting for 11 weeks. It should not take much imagination to appreciate what it's like at this very moment for those who have been waiting, who have been affected by the flooding caused by the superstorm. For 11 weeks, they have been waiting while this body sat on a bill that should have long ago been signed, sealed, and its help delivered to those in desperate need. They wait for the billions that they need to rebuild, and they need it for the transportation system. They need it to make sure that this doesn't happen, to prevent floods in the future. They wait, many shivering tonight in the cold of New York, where temperatures are again below freezing. They are in homeless shelters and hotels with friends. They are waiting. This body needs to act, and needs to act today. It is long overdue.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Gentleman from New Jersey.
And I thank you. And I yield now to the gentleman from New York, who recognizes that the people from the area have not been waiting, that their insurance claims have been paid from day one, that we are just here today to ensure that those payments continue going forward. I yield 2 minutes now to the gentleman from New York.
Is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong support of this legislation. This legislation is the first necessary step that's needed to provide the assistance and relief and aid that the people of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut require after the most devastating storm in the history of our region. In many ways, one of the top 2 or 3, unfortunately, most severe storms in the history of our nation. This legislation is essential because people are suffering. People are suffering, and the suffering increases each day. And as I said, this is the first major step that we're taking. Hopefully this will all be concluded, or this process will be completed on January 15th. I want to thank the leadership of both parties for coming together on this. But I want to emphasize that this legislation is vital. This is not a handout. This is not something we're looking for as a favor. What we're asking for is to be treated the same as victims in all other storms, all other natural disasters have been treated. And also, I think it's important to lay out, because this is part of a process, that in the legislation that was originally going to be introduced in this House, there was never an earmark in the bill. There was never any extraneous spending in the bill. I think it's important for the members in both parties to realize that. This bill is always, the House of Representatives bill was always targeted toward victims of Hurricane Sandy. It does not go beyond that. And it's important to lay that out. It's also important to realize that, again, as we are talking here today and as the vote goes forward and as we go forward to January 15th, the real suffering that's out there. And these people, their homes, my own neighborhood in Seaford, homes are devastated. There's a woman who lost 2 sons in 9/11. She lost a home now. This is a crisis of unimaginable proportions unless you're there. The national media is not following it, but if you went to these homes, if you saw the suffering that's going on, if you saw the people who don't have food and shelter, you would realize how horrible this is. So it's important that we act. It's important that we put past recriminations behind us. Let's all stand together as one, all as Americans, Democrats and Republicans. I think Governor Christie and Governor Cuomo have set that model and that tone in New York and New Jersey. So let's follow their example here. Let's go forward standing as one. And again, I urge my colleagues to strongly support this legislation today and also as we go forward on January 15th. I yield back the balance of my time.
Has expired. Gentleman from New York.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to now call up a young man who has been a leader in this from New Jersey, the Honorable Frank Pallone, for 1 minute.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute. The young gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from New York. Madam Speaker, this action by the House Republican leadership is too little and too late. I have to say I'm still very upset, and I think it was deplorable that the Speaker did not bring this bill up and the whole package that addresses Hurricane Sandy relief in the lame duck session in the last 2 days of Congress. It would have been passed, we had the votes, it would have been on the President's desk, he would have signed it, and we would have started to rebuild the shore. Now we have another delay. I don't know how many weeks, it's 9 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is. I have no idea what the Senate's going to do. My understanding is that the Senate is mired in filibuster over the next 3 weeks and isn't even coming back until after the inauguration. So that means we could be waiting another 3 weeks. And the rest of the package, which is, the most important part of it, might not even come up until we return after a week's break. We're going to be on recess, and then we come back on the 15th, and hopefully the rest of the package comes out that day. But that means now that we have 3 separate votes on this package that could have been passed and signed into law over the last couple days. 3 separate votes. It is not acceptable, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from New Jersey.
And to the other young gentleman from New Jersey, 1.5 minutes, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 41. I want to thank leadership for posting it today, and especially thank Chairman Scott Garrett for authoring this critically important legislation, boosting the NFIP's borrowing authority by $9.7 billion, and I'm very proud to be a co-sponsor. Madam Speaker, the devastation unleashed by Sandy is without precedent, and the impacted communities are in dire need of comprehensive assistance. Nowhere is this more evident than in the sheer magnitude of the housing damage and the subsequent housing need. According to Governor Christie's office, Sandy damaged or destroyed 346,000 housing units. Of that number, some 72,397 were covered by the National Flood Insurance Program, whose owners have submitted claims and are awaiting the insurance payout for comprehensive repairs. Thus far, only 18% have received funds pursuant to their claims. Over 80% of my constituents are waiting in limbo, an intolerable situation that is making a bad situation worse. Moreover, Madam Speaker, throughout the region there are a total of 115,000 insurance claims related to Sandy. Many of them are waiting as well. This is must-pass legislation. We have an obligation. We have a duty to meet this compelling need and contractual obligation. This legislation takes us in that direction. And again, I want to thank Chairman Garrett for his leadership.
The gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from New York.
Yes, Madam Chair. Let me, I apparently missed it earlier. I want to thank Mr. Garrett especially for earlier his request to make sure that we included on this bill every member from the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut delegations as sponsors of this bill, and every member of the committee. And I want to thank the ranking member, Ms. Waters, for agreeing to be an original co-sponsor on this bill. It shows that we're all working at this together, and I want to thank Mr. Garrett for his cooperation and allowing everybody from this delegation, both Democrats and Republicans, to be a part of this bill. Now I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished whip of the Democratic Conference, the individual who walked with me in Breezy Point and up and down on the Rockaway Beach, the Honorable Steny Hoyer.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I want to congratulate all of the members who represent New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and other jurisdictions who have been united in a bipartisan way to say, let us reach out, let us act now to help those who have been savaged by Sandy. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this bill that will help ensure flood insurance benefits will be available for those still struggling to recover from Superstorm Sandy. But I agree with Frank Pallone. While it is never too late to do the right thing, it is late that we are doing this thing. And we are doing only the bare minimum because the flood insurance will expire. But Frank Pallone is absolutely right. The Senate hopefully can act by unanimous consent. hopefully, on this small portion. But as we did in Katrina, we should have acted almost immediately to meet the pain and suffering and loss of the citizens, our fellow Americans, who were the victims of Sandy, but should not have been the victims of our delay. I support this legislation, and I urge the Speaker and all of us on both sides of the aisle to ensure that on the 15th of this month, we act for the balance of the initial dollars that will be available to assist those who have had this loss. And I will be very supportive on the 15th. And I know that the people of Connecticut, of New Jersey, of New York, and of Pennsylvania, and of America will hold the Speaker and all of us to the promise that no later than the 15th of this month, some 11 days from today, that we will make a full contribution to those people. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey.
And I once again yield to the gentleman from New Jersey, who also recognizes that there have been absolutely no victims of delay when it comes to the flood insurance program, because their payments have been made continuously, because that program has been funded, and we continue to fund it today. The gentleman from New Jersey for 2 minutes.
The gentleman from New Jersey
Madam
is recognized
Speaker,
for 2 minutes.
Thank the gentleman, my colleague from New Jersey, for yielding. It's been 70 days, and the residents of the Northeast have been, many have been living in misery and heartache. I'm pleased that we're taking this step to support the National Flood Insurance Program, which has met the needs of Americans across our nation when there's been flooding crises. And we in the Northeast have been facing this crisis now for 70 days. I'm glad that this essential program is going to be supported. There are about 125,000, from what I understand, Sandy-related claims that can be met by raising this cap, and I think it's good that we're about to do that. This, as others have said, is the first step of what we need to do to sort of rebuild lives, to put aside the misery that so many families and businesses have been suffering for this length of time. It's the right step. On January 15th, we'll be considering a much larger supplemental, a total of $60 billion, which will meet the needs, not all the needs, of Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York and the region. There are considerable needs. But the National Flood Insurance Program is a good program. It needs supports. This is a good first step. Let's get about it. Let's do it in a bipartisan manner. And I yield back.
It's back. Gentleman from New York.
Yes. Madam Chair, I yield 1 minute to the ranking member from and the fighter for small businesses throughout America, the Honorable Nydia Velasquez.
Gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. I ask unanimous consent to revise
without
and extend
objection.
my remarks. Madam Speaker, Hurricane Sandy has devastated New York, and thousands of my constituents lost their home and their businesses. And it is a shame, an embarrassment for this institution that the House Republican leadership continues playing games with this essential assistance more than 2 months after the storm struck. It is indefensible that as Americans continue to suffer from Sandy's impact, that the House majority could not get their act together to bring the entire 8 Senate-passed package to a vote. Talk about fiddling while New York City burns. And this is also the case with today's legislation. While I fully support providing FEMA with additional funding, it is just another sign of the majority's dysfunction. With FEMA just days away from being unable to pay flood claims, the Republicans argue among themselves about what to do. That is sad. It is a sad situation. So today we're taking care, 10 more seconds, about flood insurance. What about small businesses, the job creators in our communities? They are getting nothing. We, as an institution, come together when there's natural disaster across this nation. My constituents deserve nothing less. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time's expired. The gentleman from New Jersey.
I'm now pleased to yield 2 minutes from the gentleman from New York who has actually led the efforts on the ground, putting the shoulder to the grindstone, so to speak, to actually help and to restore some of these people's homes.
The chair
The gentleman
recognizes the gentleman from New York for 2 minutes.
Thank you much. First, Madam Chair, I'd like to just take 15 seconds to tell Chairman Garrett that as much as I appreciate him bringing this bill to the floor today, he came to my district with his wife. He came to Midland Beach, was in one of the homes, several of the homes that were completely devastated, pulling out moldy sheetrock and bringing a little hope to people in complete despair. And for that, I will eternally be grateful. And I really do thank my chairman for that compassion and letting the people, even outside of his own district, know that he's there and he cares about them. I'd also like to share with you, I called someone this morning from Staten Island that lives in Newport Beach, and they have a teenage son named Dylan, and they haven't been back in their home since the storm. And I asked, how are your two sons doing? And he said, they're doing great, but Dylan, he hasn't gone back to the house to help with the construction because he gets choked up. And it's that I want to emphasize here. These are human beings, children that have been completely displaced. And it's up to us to get them back on their feet. So today is one of those steps that I'm proud to be a part of and tell Dylan that he's going to be okay and we're going to get him back in his house. And I would ask that as we go forward with the other parts of Sandy relief, that my colleagues will stand with me and tell Dylan that he's going to be okay and we're going to get him back in his house. And with that, again, I want to thank all of my colleagues across the aisle. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and we have a lot of work to do. And I want to thank Chairman Garrett one last time. Thank you, Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York.
Madam Chair, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished ranking member from the Appropriations Committee and a hard fighter, the one and only Nita Lowey.
Gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Oh, and I thank the distinguished ranking member, Mr. Meeks, for your eloquence, as always. Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of this legislation, and I'd like to thank Chairman Garrett for introducing this legislation and for his efforts to bring it to the floor with bipartisan support. The National Flood Insurance Program has hit its limit. Without an increase in borrowing authority, it will be unable to pay for claims as early as next week. And that means that 120,000 flood insurance claims payments will be delayed, nearly all of which are due to Hurricane Sandy. However, this bill is just not enough. It's not adequate. In December, the Senate passed an emergency assistance package to aid in the Sandy recovery, which included this legislation. Earlier this week, I expected, as did my colleagues, that the House would vote on a complete emergency assistance package to aid those in Connecticut, New Jersey, New York who have lost homes, businesses, their livelihoods. Sadly, the 112th Congress ended without action, and now we are starting over on an important legislation which is absolutely critical to help storm-affected areas that should have and could have. We know that. There's no reason it wasn't signed in 2012. However, we have now been promised a vote on the Sandy Emergency Assistance Package by January 15th. Families in my district and throughout the region are looking to Congress and asking, why are you making it so difficult for us to rebuild? Why are you making us wait to rebuild? Today's legislation is a start, only a first step, toward providing relief for those who suffered as a result of Hurricane Sandy. We don't need a piecemeal approach. That's not the way the Congress acts. We need a comprehensive Sandy recovery bill passed today. We hold you to your commitment, January 15th, not a day later. We need this complete bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentlewoman's time's expired. Gentleman from New Jersey.
And at this time, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey who has seen firsthand the devastation to our state.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank Chairman Garrett for yielding some time. Madam Speaker, it's been 68 days since Hurricane Sandy devastated the Northeast, and over 2 months of suffering for my constituents. While it is unfortunately long overdue, I'm pleased that we're finally here acting to help the people of New Jersey recover. This hurricane has caused billions of dollars in damage, uprooting individuals and families from their homes, forcing businesses to close, and resulting in job loss and revenue loss. My constituents need help now recovering. I've witnessed firsthand the devastation in places like Seaside Heights, Normandy Beach, La Valette, Silverton. And I can honestly say that these places looked like war zones after the storm. Whole communities have been wiped out. Governor Christie estimated the damage in New Jersey to be over $36 billion. I applaud his swift action on Sandy recovery and join him with all local and state federal leaders in New Jersey to ensure that all relief funds get to New Jersey and families' businesses as quickly as possible. This includes adequate funding for flood insurance program we are voting on today, and I urge passage of this essential legislation and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York.
Yes, at this time I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey, the member of the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Bill Pascrell.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
You would think, Madam Chair, that we're having a Sadie Hawkins dance here today, and we're patting each other on the back. The real sponsor of this legislation, the people, have been hurt. And let's be honest about it. It took only 10 days after Katrina till President Bush signed $60 billion in Katrina aid passed by the Congress of the United States. How dare you come to this floor and make people think everything is okay? In fact, one of the gentlemen from New Jersey said, we've not waited at all. Well, the insurance runs out in 1 week. What were we going to do? Wait for 1 week and then act? We wouldn't even be here. Who the heck are you kidding? So we all come together very nicely this morning for breakfast and eggs. And we know what has happened over the last 10 days. This is a total disaster in helping those people that we are pompously saying today and pontificating about. We're helping them. Isn't that wonderful? What's our jobs? We're not doing anybody any favors. That's why we were sent here. Try it once in a while. Democracy. You may like it.
His time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Garrett.
At this point, I yield two minutes to the gentleman to realize it's not just what we do on the floor, but it's also the volunteering, the dedication to help these people as well.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
I want to thank the chairman for recognizing me, and I just want to say that I support this bill. Not because I support the increased borrowing that we're doing for our flood insurance program of $9.7 billion, but it is a contractual agreement that we owe to these policyholders to pay these claims. It's not their fault that we in the government are not good managers of our money. In 1968, when this policy and this program was put into place, it had a borrowing authority of $1.5 billion. It wasn't until Katrina that we raised that borrowing authority up to $20 billion. We still owe $20 billion. We're now raising that borrowing authority to $30 billion. In 2017, which is 4.5 years away, the borrowing authority goes back to $1.5 billion. Now, I'm sure we'll address that at 11:59 on September the 30th of 2017. But I'd like to ask both sides, on both sides of the aisle, let's start working on that now. This cost to the government is $1,763 for every policyholder that has flood insurance. The average premium is about $600. We have paid people 10 and 20 and 30 times for claims that live in the same house in the same floodplain. I had an amendment to the flood insurance bill that said if you had 2 claims due to flood and you did not take the payout, then you would have to pay a rate-based premium. It didn't pass. We've got to get into reality what this flood insurance program is for. It's mandatory. If you have a government-backed loan and you live in a floodplain that's likely to flood in 100 years, you have to have the insurance. But we need to make sure
I yield the gentleman additional 15 seconds.
We need to make sure that what we're doing is something that can manage itself and us not continually having to raise the borrowing authority for this part of our government. So with that, I do support the bill. It's a congressional obligation that we have to these policyholders, and I ask that everyone support it. And I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from New York.
Yes, Madam Chair. At this time, I'd like to bring up the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Honorable Elliot Engel from the great state of New York.
Gentleman, for how much time?
For 1 minute.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank my friend from New York, and I rise in strong support of this legislation. But I must say, Tuesday night, when I found out that we were not taking this legislation up in the previous Congress, it was the angriest I've been since I've been a member of Congress. In the last 20 years, this is the longest people affected by natural disasters have waited for Congress to provide them for needed relief. It's really not acceptable. I have voted for aid for all areas of the country, wherever there's been a national disaster, and the Northeast now deserves the same. I would remind my colleagues that New York has been a donor state. We give more to the federal government than we take back. Now we need help. And politics should not be played with the help that we need. We should be supporting the entire package. I'm sorry we're not voting for the entire package today. As was mentioned before, we now have to wait for the Senate to pass whatever we pass. This could have been gone and done on Tuesday night. It would have been, the aid would have been speeding to the people. This is simply not acceptable, and I hope there's no further delay. My constituents are suffering. The people of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut are suffering. Congress needs to get out of the way now and send not only this $9.7 billion in insurance flooding, but the entire package. I yield back
time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey.
I yield myself, first of all, 15 seconds just to set the record straight. With regard to the legislation before us, which is a flood insurance program, the aid under this program is going and has been going to the recipients in the affected area because there was funding in this program before. What we're doing right now is to make sure that that aid will continue to go to those people who have contracts for insurance. And with that, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York who also is very familiar with the devastation that is caused to the constituents.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, I thank the gentleman for yielding, and Madam Chair, I rise today in strong support of the legislation. Indeed, as was intimated moments ago, in the summer of 2011, my district was struck by Hurricanes Irene and Lee. We came together as a body to support my constituents, and with that assistance provided, we're in the process of rebuilding, still rebuilding, I might add. And now, we come together in the wake of this devastating natural disaster, Sandy. My state, along with our neighboring states, were struck again. And making certain that our communities have the resources they need has brought me to the floor today again to advocate for New York families, businesses, and farms. Today's vote is a step forward. The National Flood Insurance Program exists for circumstances like this, but more remains. We must come together at the outset of this legislative session to address both the immediate recovery needs and the longer-term rebuilding efforts. I'm committed to this recovery effort. I'm proud of the bipartisan work our delegations have achieved to date. We need to continue that, and I want to thank the gentleman from New Jersey for bringing this bill to the floor today, and I urge my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Can the clerk just identify the amount, the time remaining on both sides?
Yes, the gentleman from New Jersey has 4 3/4 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from New York has 6 3/4 minutes remaining. Chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
And I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute without objection. Without objection.
Madam Speaker, the delay in helping the victims of Hurricane Sandy is obviously inexcusable and unjust. But it's equally obvious that the time has come to do what we can to help solve the problem. That's why I'm for the passage of this bill today. It will, in fact, help flood insurance claims be honored and paid so that people can go about the work of rebuilding their homes. We've heard about the January 15th vote that's coming on the rest of the plan. I think we shouldn't be holding out false hope about that because here's the reality. I'm certain we will vote on January 15th. But of course, the Constitution says the other body has to vote too. They have to start all over again, and then the President has to sign the bill. It is my strong hope that the leadership between now and January 15th will reach out to the leadership of the other body and try to pre-negotiate a bill that the Senate would quickly and expeditiously take up so we can solve this problem. The House taking a vote on January 15th is lovely. It is also utterly meaningless if the other body does not act. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from New Jersey.
At this time, I would like to yield 2 minutes from a gentleman from a state which is not immune from natural disasters. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today we're doing the important thing, the critical thing. I wish today that this had been what we'd voted on in the previous session, to recharge the flood insurance that needs to be there so that men and women in Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, and the like will not question whether or not their country can provide them with the resources that are expected to be there in the time of a national disaster like that. But, Madam Speaker, I rise today to say that January 15th is critical. And as the previous speaker said, we do need to pre-negotiate with the Senate. We need to get the pork out. Now, none of that pork we're talking about is in New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut. In fact, it's as far away as Alaska. The bill that we will not vote on today, the pork that we will not vote on today is, in fact, the pork that was in this bill from the Senate. And my hope is that we will see on January 15th a negotiated, clean bill that only deals with the men and women and families on the Eastern Seaboard that need to be taken care of. I think that it's the President's responsibility and our responsibility and the Senate's responsibility when we do emergency supplementals to make them only about the emergency. I believe today we are buying a little bit of time, but I think for people on the Eastern Seaboard who are suffering, that time is running out, and all of our leaders need to make sure that the next vote, the vote on January 15th, as the previous speaker said, will be a vote that in fact will be pre-negotiated, that will run through the Senate, and that in fact will deal only with the people suffering on the Eastern Seaboard. I'd yield to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I think it's important to point out that the House bill never contained any of those extraneous provisions. When the bill came over here, our leadership, we agreed, all that was taken out, so there was nothing about any other state other than those directly affected by Sandy.
Right. And reclaiming my time, the gentleman is absolutely right. Had we been able to pass what we intended to be the House bill and send it back to the Senate, and the Senate would have used... Could I have
gentleman, another 30 seconds.
And the Senate then would have taken that up, although they had left town. We could have done this in the previous Congress. And the gentleman from New York has been a champion to make sure that's clearly understood. I want to be an equal champion that, in fact, whether it's Louisiana or California when the next earthquake occurs, or now our friends and colleagues from the Eastern Seaboard, actually as far south as where we stand, we do need to make sure we owe them that. And I want to thank the gentleman from New York for in fact working so hard to make sure that we do get to a clean bill. And with that, I thank the gentleman and yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York.
Yes, Madam Chair. I yield to Ms. Capter for the purpose of a unanimous consent request.
I thank the gentleman and ask unanimous consent to place remarks in the record in support of Hurricane Sandy relief wherever it is needed in our nation. Thank you, and I thank the gentleman.
Madam Chair, I now would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York on the Judiciary Committee, the Honorable Jerry Nadler.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding the time, Madam Speaker. I obviously support this bill today to replenish the Hurricane Insurance Fund, which would otherwise run dry for the entire country next week. But it does not excuse the callous action of the House leadership the other night in taking the $60 billion of relief off the table. Now we're told we'll get a vote on the 15th, and I hope they're as good as their word, although they haven't been in the past. But even so, it will take God knows how long for the Senate, because the bill they had passed is now dead, this being a new Congress. That action the other night delayed relief for the long-suffering people, the businesses the business owners whose businesses are going under, the homeowners who are suffering from mold. All of this was delayed by at least 3 weeks, maybe longer. On top of the fact that we had gone already 9 weeks. After Katrina was 10 days, 9 weeks of lack of aid, now another 3 or 4 or 5. This was the most callous action I've ever seen. The leadership of this House should be condemned for it. I hope they have the determination to make sure that this indeed comes to a vote on the 15th, that it passes, and that the Senate is induced to match it quickly. That would be the least that decency would demand. I thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Recognizing that some on the other side of the aisle can't take yes for an answer, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
Yes, Madam Chair, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey, the Honorable Mr. Sears.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, as I sit here, I was thinking that maybe there is a bias against the northern eastern state of this country. You know, this devastation can happen to any state, and no one state has the money to make sure that those people that were injured in this storm can move forward. And I will remind all those members that are not here supporting this bill that this could happen to your state. You know, as I sat here and supported Alabama, I supported Mississippi, I supported Texas, I was hoping that by now the northeast part of this country would have, Congress would have acted. It's been 77 days. Those people are hurting. People in my district still can't get back to their homes. And here we are in the last Congress, we just didn't do anything about it. Now we're moving forward, and hopefully January 15th we can get the rest of this money so those people who are suffering in all these states that were hit by this storm can get their lives back together again. And I thank you. You're back.
Gentleman yields back. Does the gentleman from New Jersey continue to reserve? Gentleman from New York.
I yield 1 minute for his floor debate. The gentleman from New York, Sean Patrick Maloney.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, my name is Sean Patrick Maloney. I'm new here. I don't know all the rules of Washington, but it sure seems like the rule here is to put off till tomorrow what should be done today, even when our fellow Americans are suffering. You know, a long time ago, I learned from my mom and dad, Jim and Joan Maloney, and our parish priest, Father Bill Nolan, a much better rule. It's called the Golden Rule. Americans by all parties live by it. The people of New York, New Jersey, and the Hudson Valley live by it. Bart and Diana Tyler of Kellogg's and Lawrence Hardware Store in Katona sure live by it. They led storm victims through the darkened aisles of their hardware store for critical supplies at the hour of maximum danger and greatest need, and consoled them as if they were their own family. Bart and Diana didn't make their neighbors wait 68 days for help. They didn't say they could do more later. They acted with speed and with caring. This new Congress can start anew today. We can act with speed and caring. We don't need to wait. I urge my colleagues to bring this additional relief to the floor as soon as possible and support the bill today. I yield back my time.
Gentleman's time's expired. Does the gentleman from New
Continue
Jersey
to reserve.
continue to reserve?
How much time do I have remaining?
Gentleman has 2 3/4 minutes remaining.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Texas.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
I thank the gentleman very much, and I thank the proponent of this legislation. It is obviously needed. I come from the Gulf region. We lost thousands and thousands and thousands through hurricanes. Hurricane Ike saw this Congress give us $3 billion. I stand here today to remind you that a police officer died, a 13-year-old died with debris falling on her, and a mother saw 2 children drawn from her hand and drowned in Hurricane Sandy. It is long overdue. I stand here as someone who's been a beneficiary, who has cried with those who have lost, demand that this money be passed today, but more importantly, I demand that we pass the total amount of money right now today. Let's help the American people. Let's help those impacted by Sandy. Let's help my fellow Americans.
Time
I
has
yield
expired.
back.
Does a gentleman from New Jersey wish to continue
reserve.
reserving?
Yes.
Gentleman from New York.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from.
closing?
Does the gentleman from New
ready to
York
close?
have any additional speakers?
I have 1 additional speaker.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
I have no other speakers. So.
Gentleman from New Jersey has the right to close.
I give 1 minute to the ranking member from the Financial Services Committee, a fighter for the people, the Honorable Maxine Waters from the great state of California.
California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you so very much, Congressman Meeks. I am so proud of the members of this Congress from both sides of the aisle who have been real advocates, who have been on television, who have been fighting. The members on the opposite side of the aisle criticized their own leadership for the delay. Ladies and gentlemen, I am from California. I have witnessed earthquake disaster. I have been involved with trying to help with Katrina and making sure that the people who were the victims of Katrina were compensated, were taken care of. This is unconscionable that this has had to take so long. I watched Congressman Meek up in Rockaway. I watched the people who cried. I watched the people who begged for help, who begged for assistance. This is so late in coming, and so I support this bill today. I am one of the co-authors of the Flood Insurance Reauthorization Bill, along with Ms. Biggert, who reauthorized flood insurance for another 5 years. Let's put the money in it. Let's do what's right. Let's take care of this disaster.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, has 1 1/4 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from New Jersey has 2 1/4 minutes remaining.
I yield myself the remaining time.
Gentleman's recognized.
It's 70 days. Unprecedented that this region has not been treated like the other regions when they were in need of help. It's 70 days. Now we're going with this bill today, and what we're receiving is a promissory note. A promissory note that on January 15th, we'll be able to say to the people from New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut that were victimized by this storm that their United States Congress, their House of Representatives are going to be by their side. So we have a promissory note. I'm concerned until the promissory note has been put into the bank and stamped that it has sufficient funds. And in this case, it's got to be put in the bank and stamped that we have the votes that are necessary for the people of this region. They've been suffering. They have suffered long enough. They need to hear from their government that their government is with them just as it has been with everybody else in this country. I, for one, wherever the disaster may be, want to say that we've got to support them. I say to this Congress, let's make sure as we put forward this promissory note, because we cannot go back home. I don't think a Democrat or a Republican can go back home after January 15th and say that the promissory check has bounced as insufficient funds. We have to come back collectively and say to the people that are suffering that they, in fact, have been helped by their government, by their people, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 1/4 minutes.
And I thank the Madam Chair, and I thank all those who have come to the floor to address this situation. For those of us who live in the affected area, our heart goes out to the families, the moms, the dads, the little children, the senior citizens who have lost everything, homes that have just been inundated with water so it's not recognizable anymore, homes that have to be totally knocked down, or homes that have to be totally refurbished, stripped down to their studs again and started from the foundation back up again to build them, homes that have been simply washed ashore or washed out to sea and will never be seen again, homes that have been destroyed, trees that have crashed through homes, electricity that has been out for weeks. Our heart goes out to the people who have suffered so much and for so long and who continue to suffer. And I commend members from both sides of the aisle to coming to the floor today to support this legislation. I thank also those people, the volunteers who took it upon themselves without any government mandate or edict or pay or what have you to go out and to rescue these people and work for these people day in and day out. From the very beginning, the OEM people, the management people, the fire department, the rescue squad, and just rank and file folks who came out and tried to help and continue to do so. To the food banks, groups like Samaritan Purse to be out there on the front lines and to support these people in their hour of need. And I extend an invitation to every single member of Congress who has come to the floor and said that they too support these people, to put on their work shoes and their work boots and their jackets and to get out of this Congress and to get out of this city and to go into the affected area and not just give speeches and not just pass legislation of other people's money, but to actually come to our state and to join us in the field and actually do the work that's necessary to get done. And so I extend that invitation to each and every one, and I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. And I ask for your support of this legislation, and I also extend an invitation to Ms. Waters to work furthermore on the legislation with regard to flood insurance, because we've heard the number earlier. This is a non-sustainable program. We're taking in something like 75 cents, and we're paying out about $1 in claims. That can't go on. We need to work together on this, and I look forward to that, and I look for a yes vote in this legislation.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair will remind all persons in the gallery that they are here as guests of the House and that any manifestation of approval or disapproval of proceedings is in violation of House rules. So now the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 41? Those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the gentleman from New Jersey?
Ask for a recorded vote.
Does the gentleman request the yeas and nays?
I ask for yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on the motion to suspend the rules on H.R. 41 will be followed by a 5-minute vote on approval of the journal, if ordered.
So we are expecting a short session in the House today. The only bit of business is H.R. 41, legislation providing aid for victims of Hurricane Sandy that happened 2 months ago. This bill amounts to an increase of nearly $10 billion, about $9.7 billion actually, in the borrowing authority of FEMA for the National Flood Insurance Program. The increase helps not only those affected by Hurricane Sandy, but others who have suffered flood damage. This is the first part of an aid package for Sandy victims. The second part is expected to be debated in the coming weeks, and we are going to take your calls in just a moment. Joining me is Dan Friedman, Washington correspondent for the New York Daily News. Dan, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
How did this bill come about? Didn't House Republican leaders decide not to consider the $60 billion disaster aid package for Sandy relief that came out of the Senate?
They did. They on I guess it was Tuesday night, they surprised the New York, New Jersey delegation who had been expecting a vote the following day after the vote on the fiscal cliff bill. They had been gearing up for votes on the full $60 billion or so of Sandy aid. House Speaker John Boehner decided abruptly in the eyes of those supporters of the bill not to have a vote on it on Wednesday, which left the members of the delegation furious and legitimately surprised. It appeared in a meeting the next day after Congressman King from Long Island and Governor Christie from New Jersey had really attacked Boehner strongly in various media outlets. Boehner reversed himself somewhat and agreed to put up this $9 billion bill for a vote today, and then to attempt to move the rest of the package that the Senate passed with a few changes around January 15th when the House is back.
So what specifically happened earlier this week to change Republican leaders' minds?
I think that the whole time House Majority Leader Eric Cantor was working to try to get a vote on the Sandy bill. Boehner was less engaged because he was focused on the fiscal cliff bill. As a result of which, when finally the fiscal cliff bill was passed by the House, Boehner decided not to do it. There's different theories as to why that is. Clearly, part of it was that there was discomfort among a lot of House Republicans in voting 2 straight days on what they saw as spending bills, the fiscal cliff bill followed by the Sandy bill. There's also possibly some tension between Cantor and Boehner there after Cantor had come out against the fiscal cliff bill, which made Boehner's life more difficult, and Cantor was obviously a big advocate of the Sandy bill.
So why are they doing just the flood insurance part today?
The flood insurance, FEMA, which oversees the National Flood Insurance Program, is running out of money to pay back claims of people who were already flooded and are now tapping their flood insurance to cover their damages. FEMA has said they're going to run out of money for the flood insurance within the next week, so around as early as January 7th. So that needs to be replenished quickly, and there's pretty broad support to at least do that. That's the easy part of the bill. The more difficult parts of the bill will be taken on in a few weeks.
So the total package is $60 billion, am I correct?
Yep.
And we can expect the rest of it to be dealt with when?
I believe January 15th in the House. The Senate has already passed it, but they're going to have to deal with it again because the House didn't do it in the last Congress. That's going to be in two parts. So some of the money that's for direct recovery from the flood will be voted in. Will be part of a bill that House Appropriations Chairman Hal Rogers brings up, and then there's going to be an amendment that includes a lot of money for rebuilding. That will be the more difficult one to get passed, but the members of the New York and New Jersey delegation, led by the small number of Republicans from those states, are pushing very hard to try to line up the votes to pass both parts of the package.
How are relief efforts coming along in the affected areas?
They've begun, and there's some federal money available, but for a lot of people, they're waiting on this federal aid package. In part, that's because some of these rebuilding programs or efforts in New Jersey on the New Jersey coast and in New York. They have to plan based on what's in this package. So some of the money that's going to be available is going to be to prevent future flooding. And if they don't have money, if they only have money to sort of rebuild what's broken, that's going to make a difference in their budgets versus if they have more money to do flood mitigation, which is a big part of the broader bill.
Any other elements of this story that you're watching closely?
Certainly this has been an amazingly controversial issue, and Congressman King's comments the other day got a lot of national attention. This is for this number of Republicans in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut as well. It really highlights their estrangement from the National Republican Party, which has become increasingly Southern in recent years. So it's obviously brought out that tension between the dwindling number of Northeast Republicans and the larger National Republican Party.
Dan Friedman, Washington correspondent for the New York Daily News, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So the House is in the middle of this 15-minute vote on the passage of the Hurricane Sandy flood relief bill that will be followed by a 5-minute vote on the Journal. And for the next few minutes, we'll open our phone lines to get your thoughts on the Hurricane Sandy legislation. Is it too late? How about the fact that the aid is being split? There will be further debate on the legislation after Congress returns next from their break. Does the delay in providing the aid affect how you feel about your representatives? And the numbers are on the screen. Democrats call 202-585-3885. Republicans, 202-585-3886, and Independents, we're taking your calls at 202-585-3887. And we'd really like to hear from those of you in states affected by Hurricane Sandy. Up first is Leslie from Lenoir City in Tennessee. She's calling on the Democrats line.
Hello.
Go ahead, Leslie.
I have one question to ask somebody. How come all the Democrats are sitting up there running down the Republicans and John Boehner when you got the Democrats that fed all that pork into a bill? They knew that the people of the Northeast was hurting so bad, and they still tried underhanded ways to sneak their pork in there. From today forward, I'm no longer a Democrat, and from today forward, I am no longer a union member because of the underhanded ways that both parties are treating the American people's money. They're putting my grandchildren, I have 4, so deep in debt that I don't believe that the way the economy is going now and the leadership that we have in Washington, that they'll ever be able to dig themselves out of the hole. I appreciate it, and I'll hang up.
Leslie, thanks for your call. Next to Cecil, calling from Taylor, South Carolina, Republican.
Yeah, I got one question. Why are we putting all this money in there? What about the insurance these people are supposed to have on their houses? Why aren't they paying for this?
That's a good question, Cecil. Thanks for your call. Justin is calling from Quakertown, Pennsylvania. He's on the Independence line.
Hi, thank you for taking my call today. Now, honestly, I'm a little upset the fact that all this stuff has been going on. I used to live in New Jersey, and I've got family in Jersey, and they've been going through a tough time. And it's always too long, too late. I feel as though we're getting held up in every which way, and I'm honestly tired of hearing these people because they don't deserve the money that they're making. And it's absolutely ludicrous. I mean,
Justin, you said you have family living in New Jersey. What part and how were they affected?
I have family in the South, and I've had family that's actually moved out to South Carolina because of that, because of Sandy, I believe.
And what kind of damage did they have?
They didn't have too much damage, but they wanted to get out of there before the whole. They weren't that close to shore, but they wanted to make sure that they didn't have to worry about the damage. So I think they moved beforehand.
Next to Harriet in Delavan, Illinois, on the Republicans line.
Yes, I'm with the previous caller. Don't these people have their own insurance? And where is or how is that $9.7 billion being split? I thought this was just supposed to go to pay the flood insurance claims for Sandy. How come it's being split? I just heard you say it's being split. So how is it being split?
Well, the funds are being split. There are two separate bills. One is for the National Flood Insurance Program, and the rest is for some of the other programs that need to be supported. We appreciate your call. From Vernon, Texas, Virginia is calling on the Independence line.
I just want to make the point that there was pork in that bill, and that was the reason Boehner wouldn't accept it. And I don't understand why people are holding him responsible for it. That's what he's supposed to do, watch that stuff.
Next, Jennifer, Staten Island, New York, Democrat line. Of course, Staten Island really hit by Hurricane Sandy. What are your thoughts?
You'll have to excuse my ignorance. I don't really consider myself into politics, but since Sandy and with everything going on, I've kind of been paying attention more. I've always considered myself a Democrat, but I've more been the type to vote the person and not necessarily the party. But this whole fiasco that is going on right now, I kind of feel like I have to change my thought pattern on this and start voting the party and start paying attention more. And I really just called to say this is opening the eyes of people that weren't really, I don't want to use the word politicians, but people that weren't really into politics and never really paid attention and kind of just went with the flow. We're all starting to open up our eyes now and open up our ears, and we will not just stand by anymore. This is sad, especially this is my home. This is my neighborhood. These are my family, my friends that are affected, and because of politics and nonsense, we're being kind of tossed to the side, and it's just not fair.
Eric Wasson of The Hill says the Club for Growth will punish members who vote for Sandy flood aid. The conservative Club for Growth said today that it will punish members who vote for the flood insurance measure aimed at helping pay for Hurricane Sandy's damage. The club will key vote the measure, using it to compile an annual rating for each lawmaker. A little further down in the article, it says Congress should not allow the federal government to be involved in the flood insurance industry in the first place, let alone expand the National Flood Insurance Program's authority, a statement from the club's Andy Roth said. And we are taking your phone calls on the Hurricane Sandy relief package the House is working on today. Laurie is in Sierra Vista, Arizona, Republicans line.
Yes, I'm a second-generation Republican, and I've been a registered Republican for over 20 years. I am absolutely appalled at the GOP of today. I cannot believe that they're operating so much on crisis management and not taking care of the American public. I live 10 miles from the Mexican border. There's all kinds of natural disasters and incidents that we need help with, and the GOP has got to take care of public health and safety just like the Democrats do, and they've got to stop being obstructionists to our president. our commander-in-chief and our president, our government. This is just not a good thing for them to be stalling and for them to be obstructing what our government needs to continue to run.
Sorry to cut you off there. To the Independence line, South Salem, New York, and Elizabeth.
Hi. I've never done anything like this before, but I just want to say I completely echo the words of Chris Christie. I was a Republican. I've become an independent, and I'm just out there. I'm going to change to being a Democrat. But I felt that Governor Christie, as a Republican, spoke more eloquently than anyone else, and he was right. They all should be ashamed of themselves. If they could see the damage that has been done on our coastal areas and what this is going to cost in the long-term future for the people that live here and their livelihoods, they need help, just like Katrina needed our help, and Joplin, Missouri, and Homestead, Florida. Everybody, every American should step up to the plate and not begrudge people who are going through these agonies the support that they need. That's all I have to say.
Thanks. Anthony is calling from Cary, North Carolina. He's on the Democrats line.
How you doing? Just got two things to say. Anybody who's against government spending and calls up about it, and they or anybody in their family gets Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Pell Grants, goes to state schools, uses the GI Bill, all those kind of things are nothing but phony. Number two, people in Staten Island, who I'm originally from New York, and they're nice people, they wanted to succeed from New York in the late 90s. They wanted nothing to do with the government. They're staunch Republican conservatives, most of them. They always vote Republican. As soon as something happened, they look to the government, which they should. But now they know. They wanted to succeed from New York in the late 90s, and Rudy Giuliani told them not to go ahead with that. So now they all get a disaster, and now they want something from the government. It always takes something to happen to you for you to realize that people need help from the government every once in a while. So all those people who are against government spending, go to the government, tell them you don't want your Social Security and Medicare, and get on with it. And don't take Pell Grants or go to a state school or take government loans. Until you can do that, you shouldn't be against government spending.
Geraldine is in Sparks, Nevada, on the Republicans line.
Hello. I'm with the woman that is from, I think it was Arizona. You know, I don't know what's going on in this country, but here we have people that are without homes, living with relatives, children that are displaced from school, and we have a Congress up there that will not help anybody in America anymore. I don't care about the pork in the bill. It's always going to be pork in bills that are passed in this Congress. The thing is, they need our help now. And Governor Christie, who got up there with the president and said, you could see the hurt in his whole demeanor, that he needs help. And, you know, for these guys to sit up there for 69 days and just not do nothing is beyond me. We have a dysfunctional government, and that's all I have to say.
U.S. employers added 155,000 jobs in December. The Labor Department reporting the nation's unemployment rate stayed at 7.8% last month after revising November's rate up from an initial estimate of 7.7%. Robust hiring in manufacturing and construction fueled the gains. That from the Associated Press. And we continue taking your calls on Hurricane Sandy relief. Chuck is in Yuma, Arizona, on the Independence line.
Well, I just have three things to say. Number one, to talk about the pork and the spend and the recent bill just passed, physical cliff bill. I believe it took Republicans as well as Democrats in the Senate to write it. So they're both to blame, and they both had their hand out, including our great senator from Arizona, John McCain. I noticed his vote. He was there, and he didn't vote no on it, number one. Number two, the Republicans are obstructionists, and it's always the same cry with them. And you go back to the Bush era and to Katrina, where they wouldn't release any money, and it became a fiasco. And until the news media got involved in it and really put pressure on the Bush government and the Republicans, they did nothing. Number three is if they don't get their act together, they should all be fired and bring new people in that have a little bit of common sense. And that's all I really have to say about this. Thank you very much.
And we appreciate it, Chuck. Next to Lou in McDonald, Tennessee, on the Democrats line.
Good morning, America. I really appreciate C-SPAN. You guys are doing great work. I just want to say, let's have a heart. Let's have a heart. Let's have compassion on our people. Let's pull together as a family and let's support one another. That's what government is for. It's we the people in charge, and let our representative represent the people, and then everything will be fine. So I just urge Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all Americans to just recognize that there is need and that we can work together, and that any kind of support is an investment that will be more than amply repaid in the prosperity of our great country. God bless America, and thank you again.
Grace is calling in on the Republicans line. She's from Breezy Point, New York.
I would like to say that your bill that you're passing today says Hurricane Sandy flood. Well, the insurance companies that most of us have decided to call it a superstorm, and that's why we do not have any benefits from the insurance companies. They are denying us left and right. In terms of flood insurance, I have had flood insurance up until June 30th of this year, when I had always paid a premium in the $600 range, and it went to $4,500. I'm in my 70s, Social Security and a pension. I don't have $4,500. I have no idea what it's going to cost me now, because I did have to apply for a loan to refurbish my home, which was destroyed by water. So all of you people in America, I appreciate you trying to help us, but don't be so cynical. Find out what's really happening with your insurance policies to the people that are hurt. We're not asking for anything. We would just like our fair share when it says we're a hurricane and not a superstorm. Thank you.
And we thank you. The Senate gavels in at 12:30 today. They'll be working on this Hurricane Sandy legislation, and then they'll recess to attend, assuming the bill passes, and then they'll recess to attend a joint session of Congress for the counting of the Electoral College ballots. This will certify the election of President Obama. That joint session gets underway at 1 p.m. Eastern. Vice President Joe Biden will preside over that session. And our final call is Susan, calling from Newberry, Florida, on the Democrats line.
Good morning. First of all, I am happy that this has happened, because everybody in our country needs to take personal responsibility for what's going on in Washington. Everybody has had their eyes closed, they said, oh, well, just go with the flow. When we were in Katrina in Mississippi, our wind insurance went from $600 a year to $6,000 a year. We didn't have any water in our house. We were on the coast, but we did not have water in our house. We were probably one of 12 houses on the coast that didn't have water. Our house was at 34 feet. The wind came up out of the water and swirled around our house, but didn't come in. Praise God, we didn't have that problem. But it took us a year to get a roof on our house. We had blue tarps on our house for a year because of all the quagmire of everybody trying to get roofs on their house just to protect what was left below. We were, like I said, we were very blessed. Everybody needs to take personal responsibility and get out and vote, and I wish that we did it like they did in Iraq and have to put your finger in the pot on Election Day so everybody can see that you voted. If you don't, go to Russia, go someplace else.
Thank you.
We need our country to be our country.
Thanks for your call, Susan. Thanks for calling from Newberry, Florida. As you can see, the House has passed this $9.7 billion bill for Hurricane Sandy floods. 2/3 majority were needed. Up next, a vote on the Journal.
On this vote, the yeas are 354, the nays are 67, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the journal stands approved. For what? House will be in order. House will be in order. It's not like we have any more votes. It doesn't really matter. For what purpose does a gentlewoman from Washington rise?
Madam Speaker, by the direction of the House Republican Conference, I send to the desk a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 17, resolution electing members to certain standing committees of the House of Representatives. Resolved, that the following named members be and are hereby elected.
I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be considered as read.
Without objection. Without objection, the resolution is agreed to and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Senate Concurrent Resolution 113th Congress, in the order of the House, January 4, 2013, the Chair announces the Speaker's appointment of 2 members as tellers on the part of the House to count electoral votes. The gentlewoman from Michigan, Candace Miller, and the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Robert Brady. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House stands in recess until approximately 12:55 p.m.
So as you heard, the House is in recess until 12:55. Members today